And now you discover verses you wish weren't in the Bible. Mark Twain made this statement. He said, "It's not the verses in the Bible that are too difficult to understand that bother me. It's the ones I do understand that really give me the hardest time." And so in that hallway, you discover obscure verses. Like, you ever play Bible roulette? I know none of you have ever done this. This is just for those of us that, I have a PhD after my main. You know what it means? Piled higher and deeper. It's like when you're in a really desperate place and you need a word. Oh, God. Oh, Jesus. And Judas went out and hung himself. Oh, I need another word. Go thou do likewise. Oh, no, I don't want that one. What you do, do quickly. Oh, God. Bible roulette only works when you get a good word. It's kind of like, well, anyway, it just only works when you get a good word. But now my bishop always gets good words. Bishop Joseph Garlington plays Bible roulette a lot. The problem is God really talks to him. And I figured if I hung out with him long enough, he would do the same for me. I still get bad words when I do it. So I decided God isn't in that for me. I did get a prophecy from a guy that didn't like me when I was ordained. All the guys that liked me gave me good words. He gave me a word because he didn't like me. And the word was, "Thus saith the Lord to Mark, there will always be a Judas to betray you, a Peter to deny you, and a Pilate to crucify you." And I've gotten lots of words in my journey of 39 years. But you know what? That old codger was telling me the truth. And that word has helped me through a whole lot of seasons with folk that think they have the ability to lay something on you when they haven't got a clue that if God called you, God will keep you. And if they crucify you, they just lift you higher only to bring you into a greater resurrection. Because I didn't call myself into this. I didn't sign up for this. There's a whole lot of other things I could have done. But I'm grateful. 39 years later, he keeps me. He's been good to me. And so, in that hallway, you begin to discover obscure verses like Isaiah 42:16. I will lead the blind by a way in which they do not know. So that the prerequisite for being led by the Spirit is a presumptive blindness that requires that you admit you haven't got a clue what the next step looks like. And then he goes on to say, who is so blind but my messenger and he who is at peace with me? And so learning how to manage that space in between a former somewhere and a not yet revealed new somewhere requires that you grow in the supernatural. And that requires that you remember the last thing he told you before he slammed the door on that chapter in your life. And so I want to teach you for a moment, and then I'm going to get to just being Italian. That means I'll talk really fast and my mouth will go faster than my mind, and you just have to figure out under the anointing what I might be saying. I want to ask you a question. How do you navigate the disappointments that show up in your life that don't follow your script? And when they show up, are you coping or are you collapsing? We're all looking for destiny maps. As a matter of fact, I have spent a good portion of the last number of years of my journey doing stuff that I've wanted to beat up Lance Wallnow, one of my closest friends, for getting me into. In 1991, he and I were talking about plundering Babylon. Really deep. And we talked about all the spheres that we need to influence, 1991, that we need to influence if we're going to bring things to a place where we see a transformation of the culture. And he said to me, he said, Mark, I know there's more in you than theology. And I had a PhD in theology. I said, yeah. He said, well, you've always talked about psychology. He said, yeah. He said, talk to me about that. Lance will lead you with a question. And then when you answer it, he said, that's what God's telling you to do. Brilliant. Just brilliant. Want to kill him when he's done, but he's brilliant. And he said, have you ever thought about looking at the dynamic of being a Daniel in the world of scholarship as it relates to human behavior and mastering the language of psychology from a biblical perspective by understanding what your enemies are teaching about it? And so I ended up pursuing a degree in a PhD in psychology. I'm 43 credits away from the PhD, but I've had to sit at the feet of Buddhists and Taoists. Most of the psychologists that are practicing therapists today have some sort of a spiritual base to what they believe because they've discovered that in the study of the mind, it doesn't bring enough answers, that there's something called a spirit in man that they've got to deal with. So at least they're on the right track. But I also discovered something about the fact that all of them are trying to figure out what destiny is all about. So that while this book reveals keys to destiny, psychologists are always offering all sorts of profiles for you to take so that you can figure out who you are and know, once you know who you are, know where you're going. I call them destiny maps. Stay with me. Some destiny maps are tied to a specific crisis that has to be resolved in each chapter of your life. So the developmental psychologist will tell you that you have to understand that within each chapter of your life, there are specific crises you will face. And your whole purpose is tied to resolving those crises so you can move to the next one. That sounds really encouraging. In other words, when I get through this one, there's another one waiting. Some destiny maps involve the journey towards or away from true identity. So they give you personality profiles. And they confuse you even more. Because when you answer all the questions and then they tell you this is what you are, you say, I ain't that. But you're the one that gave the answers. I don't care, I'm not that. Some destiny maps are about moving from the self-protective stages of life to genuine self-awareness and the capacity to think in terms of options and choices, potentials and possibilities, to making long-term commitments, to tolerating uncertainty and ambiguity, and finding peace in the tension of the opposites of your life. Personal constraint theory, choice theory, all that sort of stuff. You can go take a profile for all this. Don't even need a prophet anymore. Just take a profile. Some destiny maps are tied to your moral development and character from early childhood to mature adulthood. Some destiny maps are tied to the environment and context in which you are shaped or formed. The old argument, nature versus nurture, or both. Some destiny maps are tied to how you change over time until and during your adult years. Some events in your life can be anticipated and rehearsed. Some events are totally unexpected. The fact is, regardless of how simple life seems when you're young, by the time you reach adulthood, you discover that life can be quite complex. Here's the only destiny map a child of God needs to know. When Jesus came, he came in fulfillment of his own words prophetically prior to his incarnation, when he said, "Sacrifice and burnt offering thou hast not desired, but a body thou hast prepared for me. Lo, I come. In the volume of the book it is written of me." So that when Jesus, as a young boy, learned how to read and sat at the feet of the rabbis, everything he read from Genesis to Malachi was his life story. He wasn't reading about Abraham and Isaac. He was reading about his daddy and him. He wasn't reading about Jacob, who labored in love for 14 years for the woman he loved for. He was reading about his relationship and love by faith for a bride he would obtain in Laban's house. And when he reads about Joseph having a dream of dominion but being rejected by his brothers, he's reading his own life story. And everywhere from Genesis to Malachi, every time he read the book in that 30-year period, the Spirit was simply making him aware, this is your destiny map. And when he came up out of the water of baptism and the heavens opened, it was the first time that he had an external confirmation to his internal witness. And for the first time in his existence as a man, Jesus, Mary's boy, hears the voice of his eternal Father affirming who he is, apart from what he will do. Because if you are not affirmed for who you are, you'll never find your destiny map. Because destiny is rooted in identity. When you know who you are, you will know what you can do. And when you know what you can do, you will know what you can obtain. But we live in a performance-driven, performance-oriented, post-World War II, secular Western culture that has trained us to do in order to be. So we've got people performing to get acceptance, people performing to get approval. So they only know themselves by their performance because no one's ever affirmed their essence. So if they don't perform up to our expectations, they are not good enough. And that is the spirit of infirmity.